Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to this week's Chasing Giants podcast, brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don Higgins, I'm Terry Peer. Don, we need to start this episode. We got a bunch of stuff we want to talk about this week, but let's start this off. I know a lot of people have been concerned and sending you notes about your recent little health scare and stint in the hospital, where I know you enjoyed the food for 2 days. So why don't we just start the show off by you giving everybody a quick update?
Well, I can tell you, Terry, I did not eat a single bite of hospital food. Robin was bringing me food, so I ate pretty good, actually. But, so when I left the hospital, they gave me a whole sheet full of appointments that I've got to have, and did one yesterday for some more blood work. Actually, this afternoon, I'm going in to be fitted for a heart monitor that I got to wear for 30 days. Next week, I got to go in for an MRI. I don't know if any of the listeners have been through the MRI process, but basically I tried it twice when I was in the hospital, and it's like strapping you down to a 2x4, taking a hockey mask and putting on your face and tying it to the 2x4, and then shoving you in a paper towel tube and making you sit there for about 45 minutes. I tried it twice, and I'm like, folks, this is not going to work. I got the heebie-jeebies before I ever got my head stuck all the way in that tube. And so they're going to have to put me out and shove me in that tube. So next week I go in, and they're going to totally sedate me and do my MRI. The CT scan showed, I don't think I've shared this yet, the CT scan showed that I had at least one event. They called it an event, which I think is their term for a mini stroke, before I was in there. And then I had a second one, when I went into the hospital. So I've had at least two of those. And the fear is the next one will be a bad one. So we want to do everything we can to prevent that. I'm on a medication for blood pressure and another blood thinner, which actually, they seem to be working, because I've been on them about a week now. And before I went in the hospital, I was having headaches, and weird kind of headaches for, probably the last few weeks, and almost on a daily basis, and sometimes multiple times a day. And sometimes they were bad, sometimes they weren't as bad, but it was daily, and sometimes multiple times a day. I was having these headaches and such, and dizziness. And I didn't even tell Dwayne and Janice this, but the day before I went in the hospital, I was at a meeting with them at a restaurant in Arthur. And as we was sitting at the table, all of a sudden I got hit with a headache, and my vision went blurrier than it ever has, to the point where I couldn't even see their faces across the table.
Oh my.
And I thought, and that might have been the previous event that the CT scan showed. And
yep.
So that only lasted, the blurriness only lasted about 30 seconds, and then it cleared up. I was afraid they was going to be calling the ambulance on me sitting right there, and they don't even know that. They're not going to know it till they listen to this podcast. But and then the next day, when I was driving to do that consulting visit and had that headache that just wouldn't go away, just kept getting worse, more dizziness, blurry vision, I knew that there was something serious that I needed to get a handle on. Yeah. So got lots of people that have reached out and offered prayers and text me and messages on social media and this and that. And guys, I'm so grateful that I can't even express how grateful I am for all you folks that have prayed for me and continue to pray for me. So please keep it up. I'm not out of the woods by any means yet. The doctor told me that I am not to do anything that elevates my heartbeat. So I can't be climbing hills or anything like that. So I've been on a few consulting visits, but the ones I've been on, I've rode a side-by-side and we covered most of the property that way. And we'd get off. I can walk, but it's just that, I can't climb hills and be huffing and puffing. I got to take it easy. So anyway, hopefully with this MRI I'm having next week and this heart monitor they're putting on me, we're going to get to the bottom of it pretty quick and see what the issue is and what the treatment is for whatever the issue is. And I'm hoping it's something that can be resolved fairly easily. I mean, I've changed my diet a little bit since then anyway, and I probably needed to. I haven't had a cheeseburger for breakfast in over a week, so that's probably a good thing. I'm trying to eat better, but the big thing I want to express to everyone is I am so grateful for all of you who reached out to me. And I mean, it literally was over 1,000. There was like 1,300 messages on my social media post offering prayers. And then several hundred more reached out to me and even reached out to you and reached out to my wife and my parents and such. So I'm really grateful that all you folks think enough of me to keep me in your prayers.
Yeah, I think it's the word started even spreading inside of the Amish communities somehow after you posted it, and we started getting a lot of phone calls. It's amazing that we get focused sometimes on the people that leave the nasty comments, but something like this, it really shows us how many people support us, and we really appreciate it.
Oh, for every hater out there, there's hundreds of supporters, and you're right. We just, and especially myself, I just need to forget about the haters because they're always going to be there, but they are in such a minority. The good people so far outnumber them that it shouldn't even be a concern. That very tiny, less than 1% that want to throw out the negative. We got so many positive people in our corner, and I'm extremely grateful for that.
Well, I have a question. When you go to the doctor and they start talking about your new diet and they want you to eat some type of cream or ketchup on every single meal that you eat, what are you going to do?
Well, that's just not going to happen. No, I'll eat good. Right before this podcast, I was eating an apple, for example. I've started eating a lot more fruits and vegetables, and I've eaten. I went somewhere the other day where I typically get beef brisket, a barbecue place where I typically get beef brisket, and so I got smoked turkey instead. I'm going to change. I mean, I'm committed to making sure I remain in good health. I got, family that loves me and depends on me for things, and I got 3 grandsons that I want to see them grow up, and I got too many positive things not to do the right thing. I can't be wasting my health away just because I like cheeseburgers for breakfast. And I will say, that it used to be cheeseburgers and Dr. Pepper. I have not had any soda pop since back in mid-May. Yep. And I used to live on candy bars. I'd be on the road consulting, and a lot of times for breakfast, I'd go into a convenience store and I'd get Dr. Pepper and a candy bar, and that was my breakfast. I have not had any candy or any pop since back in mid-May. So I was already kind of on the right track of getting things in order anyway. Now I'm just taking it to the next level and cutting out some of those fatty fried foods.
Well, I'm glad that you're getting it checked out, because even back in, when we were hunting the rut a lot together in Illinois, you were having some episodes where you're feeling a little lightheaded and didn't really even want to get up in a tree stand. So I hope all of this fixes all of that and we get some stuff under control. Let's talk a little bit about a social media post that you made this week. I believe it might have even been on Thursday. We're recording on Friday. But it's about reaching a property ceiling, and I think it's a good conversation for people who have sat in the tree stand all winter, and they've kind of got their mind set on some projects they want to do or some changes they want to work on. Maybe they've reached out and they have a consultant coming. But we've all sat in a tree stand for a lot of hours. debating on how we can do better or how we can make our property better. But I really found this comment that you made on social media yesterday about a ceiling, a glass ceiling on a property. Dive into this a little bit. Start off with what you said, and then we'll take a break from Osseo after you're done.
Yeah, the thought has kind of been in my mind for a while. It started with something Wes Delks told me a couple of years ago, and he was absolutely spot on. He made an observation that, we do a lot of repeat consulting visits for clients. And when we go back to see a client's next property, the second property that a client has is always way better than the first property. I can't think of one single time where I did a repeat visit to a client's place and to look at another property, and the second property was worse than the first one. It just doesn't happen. I think our first visit kind of opens their eyes to what to look for in a property. They realize that their first property is not going to ever help them achieve the goals that they have. And so they either sell it and buy another property, or maybe they keep it and buy another property. But either way, the second property is always better. And the other thing is, I shared a lot of pictures on my social media this fall of clients with the bucks they shot, and some really good ones. And there's a lot of clients that have shot bucks that are nice for their area, but they weren't quite what the client was hoping for. And it just, I try to be honest, as we all do. We try to be as honest as we can with these clients. And before we even agree to look at or to take on a new client, we want to see an aerial of the property, and then we want to ask them about 10 or so questions to get a good feel for the situation. And I know one of those questions is about their goals for the property. And that's one of those questions that I really key in on first. So I look at that aerial, I look at the client's goals for that property. And then all those other questions will it's like the hunting pressure on the property. How many people are hunting there? What are you willing to do to the property? Is this just a deer hunting property, or is there a whole lot more going on there? Are we using it to, we got kids that have a dirt bike track or something, or you're hunting turkeys and small game and maybe even have coon dogs, who knows? But I want to see a list of all the other things that are going on that property. And then I want to know about the hunting pressure around that property. And what I'm doing is I'm taking all those other questions and the answers to those other questions, and then I'm looking at that goal and looking at that aerial and seeing, can we really help this person achieve their goal on this property with all these other factors playing in? And there's times where I'll tell a guy that, you know what, nobody on the planet is going to be able to come to your property and help you achieve your goal on this particular property. And I would rather have that conversation before any of us go to visit the property than show up there. And then once you show up, and the client's pretty much obligated to pay you for your time and travel, and then find those things out. So every property has a ceiling. In other words, if you did everything you possibly could to make that property the very best it could be, you totally took the habitat and you made it the best habitat that it could possibly be, you managed that property correctly, very minimal hunting pressure. Maybe you're the only guy hunting the whole property. You only hunt when the conditions are right and wind direction. You got fantastic access. What is the very best you could hope for that property on a consistent basis? So, a ceiling on one property might be 150 inches. You can just count on every year you're going to have a 150-inch buck on that property. Now, maybe today you're not there. Maybe you're only seeing 130s, and we just need to get another year on those deer to get them up to the 150s. But every property has a ceiling, and what we're trying to do is help that client reach that ceiling. We're not going to bust through it, and if that property ceiling is 150, we're not going to start magically shooting 170s there. There's a ceiling on every single property. And that's what, our clients have to recognize. And even the listeners of this podcast, whoever, if you own a property, manage a property, lease a property, whatever, that property has a ceiling.
Right.
And what I'm trying to do is get people to recognize that fact that there's a ceiling, and then determine what that ceiling is, and then determine, am I better off to continue working on this property, or would I be better off shifting gears, selling or no longer leasing this property and finding another property whose ceiling will reach my goals? And the big thing is that I want everyone to take away from this conversation is that whatever your ceiling is, there is absolutely no one on this planet that's going to help you bust through that ceiling. I can't do it. There's no other consultant out there that's going to do it. Whatever that ceiling is, it's what it is. And some of the things that factor into that ceiling are a big one is what lays around that property. We talked about that many times.
Yep.
Things that we have no control over. The other thing is, the state game regulations. Take a state like Indiana, for example, where you got, 3 weekends and 2 full weeks of rifle season right in the middle of November. That's going to kill a lot of young bucks, and that's going to drop your property ceiling. The size of the property, the bigger the property, obviously, the better the odds that you're going to get some bucks to those older age classes and, have a higher ceiling. But whatever your ceiling is, we want to do all we can to reach that ceiling, but we're never going to go through it.
Yep. It's amazing how many, everybody wants to shoot a world-class whitetail, but, finding one is the hardest part, right? You've said that multiple times, but just to miraculously change something and then the next year, it's impossible to get, like you said, you might be able to inch up that ceiling a little bit over a longer period of time. You've done that on your property. We've talked about that many times, but that's a 30-year process. But to magically come in and put your hope in somebody saying in 2 years you're going to have consistently 220-inch non-typical deer running around, it's just not possible.
Right. And I think one of the biggest factors that helps a manager reach their property ceiling is how they manage the deer herd. And I didn't realize that when I started years ago, but I've been working on a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to be giving this winter at least, I'm giving it at least 3 different places. I'm going to be giving it to the Kansas Whitetail Summit. I think that's March 1st. I'm out in Kansas. The Iowa Deer Classic in Des Moines, Iowa, the next weekend, I'm going to be sharing that PowerPoint. And then next summer, we're going to be there's a new event coming to New York for the guys in the Northeast. There's a multi-day event coming to the Northeast that you and I are both going to be there. I think we're going to do a live podcast there one evening, but I'm going to present that seminar at that location as well. But how we manage our deer herd is a huge factor in reaching our property ceiling. And I think there's probably some people out there right now that think that they've reached their property ceiling, and they haven't reached the ceiling, but they've reached a plateau. The way they're managing that farm right now,
right,
it's as good as it's going to be with the management that's taking place right now. And I encourage you to come out to this seminar at one of these locations if you possibly can, because I think some of that information will help you burst past that plateau to the real ceiling of your property. Because to be honest, Terry, I don't think most properties are at their ceiling. I think most properties can be improved today.
Well,
so
correct me if
even though you may not be at the ceiling, I think they can still be improved.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is my opinion. I think that from an age structure standpoint, making adjustments to how we hunt and putting intrusion on can immediately get you better age structure as far as the bucks that you're killing. But the size of those antlers to bust through that ceiling, that's the tougher, longer term thing that you're talking about. But most people, like you said, they haven't reached their ceiling. But I think for the majority of hunters, the way they hunt and how they hunt, and the neighbors, not just them, is what's preventing you to have your age structure. That's just my opinion.
And you're exactly right, but it goes back to every property has a different ceiling, and there can even be two properties right next to each other that have a different ceiling based on layout of the property, size of the property, things like that. Your neighbors are going to have an impact on your ceiling, no doubt about it. So you get a property like mine that's isolated, surrounded by open ag, and you're going to have a much higher ceiling than one that's sitting right in the middle of wooded cover for miles and miles where the deer just wander off and don't recognize property lines. You take a property that sits right next to a big no hunting sanctuary, maybe hundreds or maybe even 1,000 acres of no hunting, that property is going to have a way higher ceiling than one just a mile or two away that doesn't sit next to that sanctuary. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. But the big takeaway from this is that every land manager needs to recognize that their property has a ceiling. They need to recognize what that ceiling is, and then they might need to make a decision. Do I stick with this property, or do I move on and find another one?
Yep. All right. Let's take a quick break from Osseo. I want to come back and talk about late season hunting a little bit. You also made a post about that, and maybe some goals that some hunters are possibly, we get to that situation, the season's coming down. Am I going to sacrifice what my goals were as we're in the stand? And then let's talk a little bit about a friend of ours and the buck he harvested on a property you did a consulting visit. So we'll be right back after this message from Osseo.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear, prepare to be invisible.
All right, Don. Well, let's talk a little bit about late season. You don't have a target buck as of now. Nothing's shown up that has enamored you with basically having a new target on any of the properties that you're monitoring. And I'm out of town right now, and I made the mistake yesterday of turning on cable and letting the outdoor channel play as I was sitting here, and I made the mistake of watching outdoor television. I'll just leave it at that. But on two different shows that were playing in the background, I actually heard the host of the show talking about the season's winding down. I need to figure out, basically settle. They were implying that they were, changing their goal, changing their decision. And I don't know if it was because they were trying to get content for their show, and I'm not judging by any means, but I know that there's probably a lot of people listening to this right now that have worked their tail off all year for maybe a target buck or to reach a certain goal. And they're sitting there through late season right now with that dilemma of what to do when something that's just under that walks out. And you made a post similar to this the other day too. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're getting into some good hunting here with the weather that we're having. I mean, it didn't even get above freezing yesterday. I watched my trail cameras, my cell cameras on my phone, and you can see some definite peaks of deer movement, and you see a lot of periods where there's almost no movement. It's a stark contrast from what it was a few weeks ago during the rut. Those movement patterns are very distinct. The afternoon right there around the last hour of daylight is day after day. That's the period of peak movement for the whole 24-hour period, including the middle of the night. And it presents a real opportunity, especially if you're on a property with minimal human intrusion, or if you're hunting a property that's got prime food sources, because when that weather gets bad, as far as temperatures and snow and such, deer are going to take chances that they wouldn't during other times of the year. They just have to. They're going to be on their feet in those food sources in daylight hours more than they typically would, and they've got to consume those calories to stay alive. It presents a real opportunity for a deer hunter, but it's at this point of the year. I think years ago, I had a mindset that, I wanted to kill a buck every season, just like everybody else. But then it dawned on me, and this has been 20, 25 years ago, it dawned on me that these bucks that I'm out there hunting now, they've made it through gun season. They've made it through the rut. There is a very, very good chance that every buck out there today is going to be alive next season. Now, they're not all, but a good majority of them are going to be alive next season. So let's just say your goal is to shoot a 150-inch buck, and that's been your goal all season. Now we get into the late season. Now, there's a lot of deer hunters, and again, it's their choice. The name of this podcast is Chasing Giants. We are trying to help people chase the big, old, mature bucks. And if they want to shoot something else, that's totally their business. And we're not looking down on them at all. But for those guys that want to shoot the giants, let's just say your goal is a 150-inch deer. Let's say that, you've been doing this a while, and you're like I have been over my career. You're slowly raising the bar one step at a time. And currently your bar is set at 150 inches, and you want to kill a buck that's 150 inches. Well, we get into the late season, you're in the last week of season, things are winding down, and you start thinking that, that 135-inch buck that I've been seeing on a regular basis and I've been passing to this point, he's looking pretty good. I don't want to eat a tag. I want to shoot a deer. So along comes that 135, and you put an arrow in him. Well, guys, you know what you just did? You just shot next year's 150-inch buck. That's what you did. There's nothing wrong with ending the season with an unfilled tag. I've probably done it more than anybody listening to this podcast. Do it all the time. Even to this day, there's years that I don't kill a buck. And I've just got the mindset at this point of the season that when those bucks come along past my stand, I have a lot of control over whether that buck is here next season. And, the odds are good that he's going to be bigger next year than he is this year. I would rather let that deer go and see what he's going to be next year and then shoot him. Now, I want to back up just a little bit, because if that buck was a target buck all along and he comes by, absolutely, I'm going to shoot him. And I would sure advise everybody else to do the same. But what I'm talking about here is lowering that bar as season winds down. And there's some guys that, they start with the bar sky high, and then they get halfway through the rut and it comes down little, and then it just keeps coming down. And as the season, winds on, we get to the end, that bar has been lowered, several times. And if you want to consistently kill giants, whatever level you're at, it doesn't matter. But you need to stick with that goal. That's what I want to encourage everybody to do, is stick with the goal. The goal you had on opening day, it should be the same goal that you have the last afternoon of the season. Because you're never going to get there if you keep compromising. So get that goal, stick with that goal, and eventually you'll make it. And eventually killing 150-inch bucks is going to become easy for you if that's the point you're at now. And then you raise the bar again. Well, let's say you raise the bar let's say you kill 150-inch bucks 3 seasons in a row, and you decide it's time to raise the bar again, and next time you want to raise it to 170. Well, guess what? You're probably going to have a few seasons that you don't tag 170-inch deer, but you could tag 150s. And if you want to take your journey to the ultimate level, you're going to have to stick with your goals. If you compromise your goals, you're never going to take it to the next step.
Yeah. I think the pressure that our community, meaning deer hunters, puts on ourselves, whether it's through social media or not, also gets people feeling a little froggy, like they have to perform. They're trying to be something they're not. We hear that noise all the time. And, when we're talking to especially our consulting clients that have to buy into a whole new process a lot of times, or a whole new philosophy of how they hunt, the best thing that we can do is offer advice, and that is block out the noise. Your goal is your goal and not someone else's. And that pressure, whether you're on the outdoor channel or you're someone that doesn't even have a social media page, if you listen to that noise, it's going to sway your decision making.
And I totally understand the pressure. I remember back in the day when I was writing a lot, putting out a lot of magazine articles. And, when you shoot a buck, that is fodder for numerous articles. So you can tell the story of that hunt, and there's an article. You can talk about the hunting tactic that you use to kill that buck, and there's another article. And there's just so many ways you can spin that, and you can get half a dozen articles out of one buck kill. So I remember that back when I was, an avid outdoor rider, where I felt that pressure to kill a buck, because that gave me so many article ideas that I could plug. And, as an editor of Whitetail Live, I put together a copy of writer's guidelines for people that want to submit articles. And one of the guidelines is that if you're doing a how-to article, in other words, you're trying to share a hunting tactic or something, I want to see bucks on the ground. Don't just throw out ideas, theories. Until you can show me bucks on the ground that were killed using that method, I'm not interested in your article. And I'm talking mature bucks. So it's just something for guys to consider that are listening to this and are wanting to become an outdoor writer or whatever. You need the material to put out, or you need the experience to put out good material. And that experience comes from killing deer. But if you're compromising your goals all the time, just to do that, you're succumbing to the pressure. And I was able to fight through it. There's more than once where season was winding down and a buck below my goal came by, and I just had to leave my bow hanging, because I knew if I snapped my release on that deer, it was probably getting shot. So I just had to learn to leave my bow on the hanger. And I derive a lot of satisfaction, even to this day, out of videoing those bucks instead of shooting them. And that might be some advice, for the listener, that if you have trouble sticking with your goal, get a video camera and video those bucks. There's great satisfaction to be derived from that. I mean, when I go hunting today and I come back with some good video footage, I don't have to touch my bow. I am just happy as can be that I got some great video footage.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to shift gears just a little bit before we take a break for Midwest Land Group and then answer our questions, to share pictures of our good friend Todd Covey. You did a consulting visit on this property, but he shot this buck this year, and I just shared my screen for you. But there's an interesting story behind this. First of all, did Todd send you the stuff about this deer?
So Todd did share this with me, and I just want to say Todd is one fantastic individual. I think a world of him. He is always checking on me and my daughter and offering prayers. So just a fantastic person.
Yeah, Todd and I have known each other for a lot of years and good friends. He's actually a real world dealer in Northern Kentucky and a 360 blind dealer. So, but yeah, good friend. But I want to share some of these pictures, and for the people listening on the on the audio, we'll just have to kind of explain this. But Todd's holding this buck, a 10-pointer. Not a lot of mass, is a decent tine length. It was shot in Kentucky. He's actually in a real world soybean plot, and shot it during rifle season. But I'm going to show a picture of this buck in early season that he had, and this mass that's on his belly. And this thing is the biggest. I've seen deer with mass or growth on their body before, but never anything as big as what this one is. This thing is huge. And you look at this comparison, he's got a full-size men's basketball. The buck is hanging in the shed after he shot him. And this ball on this deer's belly is the size of a basketball. Have you ever seen anything like this?
I've got a buck on my farm right now that's got an abscess kind of on his rear flank, but it's not near this big, not even close. And you know that the first picture that you showed there, Terry, that buck looks, if you look at his antlers, he looks like a 3.5-year-old. But if you look at his head, that is absolutely a fully mature deer. So obviously, I'm going to guess that abscess or whatever it is caused him some health issues.
Sure. The one view of the growth, it actually is hanging down so far you can see where there's no hair, and it's been cut and scraped from either jumping fences or different things. But I've never seen anything. Any idea what causes this? Is it a tumor? Is it an injury? Could be anything.
I have no idea, to be honest. I'm going to guess an injury. But who knows for sure. I know the buck on my place, he got his last November, and it was like, I had pictures of him. He was fine. And all of a sudden I got pictures of him, and he's got this big lump on his flank, probably the size of, it's not the size of a basketball, but probably about the size of a cantaloupe. And then it over time, it slowly went down. Now, he's still got it to this day. And right now, it's probably about the size of a baseball, maybe a softball, somewhere in between a baseball and a softball. But it's very visible in every picture if you get his picture from that side. But it didn't seem to cause him any issues, because he put on several inches from last year to this year. And it didn't seem to cause him any issues at all.
Well, this specific buck, we can talk a little bit about, people's perception or theories in aging deer when they're on the hoof. But everybody that looked at this picture right here, like you said, they would not maybe think, but Todd just got the results back. This deer's 7.5. And, he obviously, he told me this morning that he's going back because he thinks he has an idea. He's got pictures of this deer for about 4 years, if it's the one he thinks it is. And it's really this, whatever injury that this thing had to put that big of an abscess on him has really turned the antler growth back, and his score suffered from it. But we get a lot of people send us pictures every season of how old is this buck. This is a perfect example of, until you have a history with him, you just don't know.
Right. Yeah, looking at his antlers, I'd say 3.5. But, well, that head sure doesn't look like 3.5.
It's got a big old mule head on it. So let's take a quick break and listen to a spot from Midwest Land Group, and then we'll be back to answer some questions from our listeners. We'll be right back.
Ever had a terrible real estate experience? Average realtors usually spend more time selling themselves than on selling your land. They'll tell you anything to get the listing. They know that if they get the listing, you're stuck with them. Not here. Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. That means if we don't meet your expectations, you can fire us. That puts all the pressure on us to perform. We don't just list land, we sell it. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us. Visit us at MidwestLandGroup.com.
All right, our first question comes from Casey Larson from Downing, Wisconsin. Says, hello, Don and Terry. First off, I want to wish you both a happy Thanksgiving. This question is for Don and probably something the average hunter doesn't put much thought to. How many buck fawns do you think it takes to make one target buck with your standards, being at least 5 years old and 180 inches? This includes being killed by predators as fawns, farmers mowing them through a haybine as a baby, car collisions, poachers, EHD, rut fatalities, having to survive 5 seasons of bow, crossbow, youth hunt, traditional gun season, muzzleloader, brutal winters, etc. I'd like to hear an answer for your own farm, where I figure the odds are much better, and an answer for your permission pieces, where connecting woodlots have more fatal consequences for bucks. Does a figure of about 10,000 buck fawns to make one target buck away from your home farm sound about right? Also note I didn't add CWD as an issue for taking out bucks before they're 5. Well, Casey, that's an interesting question, and one that I really never thought of before. How many buck fawns are born for every one that would be 180 years, that makes it to 5 years old and scores at least 180 inches. I don't really have the answer, but even on my farm, my farm is probably, it's a good bit better here. I would say on my farm, it's probably a couple hundred. I would say off of my farm, it's in the thousands. I run a lot of trail cameras over a lot of properties, and I'm telling you, I don't get 180-inch bucks off of my farm every year. I may have, I think earlier I counted up, and I mentioned on the podcast that I had cameras on 26 different properties. And I don't have a single 180-inch buck on camera off of my farm. And I've got cameras in Iowa, Ohio, and here in Illinois. And so 25 properties are not mine, and then the one is mine. I've got 180-inch deer on my farm, or did have this season. But off of my farm, I didn't have one this year. I don't think I had one this year or last year. And in fact, probably the last one I had was the Joey buck that I shot in 2020, the same year I shot Mel. So off of my farm, it's definitely several thousand buck fawns are born for every one that reaches 5 years old and 180 inches. And on my farm, it's way, way better. And a lot of that is going to go, I keep talking about this presentation that I'm going to be doing this winter. I'm telling you, I think it's the best seminar that I've ever put together. Had Steve Shields make some slides for me, some graphics to include in this week, actually, and still not done with it. But I think the big difference is how I manage my deer herd on my farm. It's been the game changer that's taken this property to the level that it's at. And without a doubt, way more bucks on my farm make 5 years old and 180 inches than they do just right off of my farm, even a mile or so away. So it's got a lot to do with the management, but a very interesting question.
Yep. Okay.
The next one comes from Drew Harmon from Floyd, Virginia. It says, "Dear Don and Terry, my question is about mock scrapes. Since listening to the podcast, I have noticed both of you guys talk about using rope scrapes. Is there a reason you use a rope instead of a branch or vine? Seems to me a vine or branch would look more natural and encourage more deer use. Thanks again for all the great information you guys provide and helping young hunters like myself reach my goals and shave off the learning curve to become a better whitetail hunter and put more big bucks on the ground. Thanks and God bless." Well, Drew, the big reason for ropes versus vines, and I'll tell you, if you're on public ground or something like that, a vine's the way to go. Last thing you want to do is hang a rope where every Tom, Dick, and Harry walking through the woods sees it and comes over and messes with it and stands in the scrape under it and then starts looking around for what's going on. And so the vines have their place, but if you're on a permission property or one you own, if you think about it, how many vines are out there hanging in the woods? A deer's got vines hanging everywhere. And a vine is pretty stiff where a rope is more limber. And I've got literally thousands and thousands of pictures of bucks coming to these ropes and working that rope for several minutes. I mean, working it through their antlers and rubbing their face on it and getting up on their hind legs and whatever, working these ropes over. And I think that they use vines, no doubt about it, they use vines. But in my opinion, from my experience, I think they like ropes better. And they're not going to find a rope hanging all over the woods like they do vines. So that's the two big reasons for ropes versus vines.
You have a lot more material the way we fray them that it will hold scent than just a vine will. Not saying that the scent isn't on a vine, but you have a lot more surface area that collects all that scent. But it's got to be it's got to work, because every single scent company out there is now selling a rope with whatever secret sauce that they want to put on it. It's amazing how this has taken off in the last couple of years. It's just blown up. I mean, I looked at a website, I think yesterday, and sure enough, they're they've packaged a rope with their scent that they're selling. I mean, it's amazing.
Guys, don't go buying these packaged up ropes, special ropes for rope scrapes. You can go to your local farm store, or you get on the internet's what I do, and I buy a coil of this stuff. It's a 50 feet long. You want to just use a 1-inch rope, either hemp rope or manila rope, and cut it to the length that you need for whatever branch you're going to hang it on. Put it outside to weather and get the odor out of it. If you come to my house right now, in my front yard is an oak tree that's got pieces of rope hanging in it that I'm just leaving out there to weather and get the scent off of them. And this winter, after season, if I find a place where I want to put a rope scrape, I'll just grab one off the tree in my yard, and I'll take it out there, and I'll wire it up to the branch, and away we go. So you don't need to spend a ridiculous amount of money because somebody cut a piece of rope to 3 foot length, and most of those ropes are too short for most branches. I mean, I would say the average piece of rope that I got hanging from a tree branch it's got about 4 foot of length, but then it's got a knot on top of that. You know, I put the knot on there to keep it from pulling off when I wire it to the tree branch. But you're probably looking at a 4 or 5 foot piece of rope. And I think most of these ropes that are being sold are, you know, they're looking at profit margin. They're probably making those things about 36 inches at the most, and throwing them in a bag and putting a bottle of scent in there and charging you 10 times what they got in it.
The biggest thing is there's no shortcut on getting that chemical scent out of it or wherever it was stored in a warehouse. Just like it's going to absorb scent from a deer, it's absorbing everything that's in a shed or in a warehouse or in a package or even where it was made. And I've heard of people soaking them in baking soda, dragging them behind four-wheelers. People right now get them and put them out in the yard in a tree. There's no shortcut for this. And if you try to take something out there that's got that chemical smell on it, good luck getting a deer to put his nose against it twice.
That's a good point also, Terry, for not buying these ropes, because you cannot tell me that these people that are packaging these ropes, and they've got a spool of it, they're just cutting off whatever their length is, and they're throwing it in the bag. That rope has not been de-scented, if you will. Folks, just go buy your own rope before you ever introduce deer scent to it. Hang it in a tree in your yard or wherever. Put it outside somewhere, and let the weather take care of that scent for weeks or months. And then you got it ready. Whenever you do find a spot to put one, you just go grab a piece of your rope, and you've got one that's already been weathered and de-scented.
We produced a really good video that goes into all of these details. Just search Higgins Outdoors rope scrapes, and it'll be the first one that comes up. That's your best tool when trying to figure out how to make them and what to do with them. So.
Next question comes from Steve Martinez from Homer, Michigan. It says, Don and Terry, in mid-October, I had my first encounter with a doe fawn, which was particularly small. In the evenings, the fields would fill up with deer feeding in our rye cover crop. This fawn would interact minimally with other deer and was never with a mother, it would appear. As the season progressed, I began to wonder on the health of this fawn. November 9th, the morning hunt, she walked by me and I noticed scat down her rear end. I contemplated harvesting this fawn as I felt she was deteriorating. I ended up finding her on the 15th deceased. I have heard you say things about having bacterial infections and such when you see that. This was my first encounter that I can recall of a situation like this. I am curious to see how you guys would have approached this scenario. And if you choose to harvest this animal, what would be the course of your actions for investigation, if any? Happy holiday season. God bless. Well, Steve, more than likely, that fawn, I'm going to guess, was orphaned at some point based on the fact that you never seen it with its mother. And as an orphan fawn, it was probably orphaned before its gut was fully, let's just say, functional. You know, they start off, the only food they're getting is their mother's milk, and then they're getting the milk and supplementing it with plants. And, they got to build up that gut. And something that you may not know that I learned when I had the captive deer, when we had bottle fawns, the fawns were born and we raised them on the bottle to keep our doe herd tame. you needed to feed those fawns dirt. So we'd have those fawns in little pens individually, and in each pen we'd have a bowl of dirt, fresh dirt that we'd scrape up, and that they would eat that dirt, and it would get the bacteria working in their gut, and it would develop a good digestive system. My guess is this fawn was orphaned before it had a good digestive system. And you can see the same thing with baby calves. If you see a baby calf, a bottle calf, it's not, you're not going to see it on a calf that's on its mother, but a bottle calf. And it looks like it's real skinny, skin and bones. What's happened is they've tried to introduce food to that animal before it was ready, before its gut was ready. They're trying to wean it as quick as possible and introduce it to solid foods as quick as possible. And its gut is just not ready for that yet. It's a process over time. And that's probably what happened with this fawn. His mother was killed somehow before it was ready for solid foods and caused all kinds of digestive issues. However, you bring up a point about seeing the scours or diarrhea on a deer's rear end. And if you see that on a mature deer or even an older fawn, more than likely that's a bacterial issue. And so, we all have bacteria in our gut. Every animal has bacteria in our gut. It's what breaks down our food and helps with the digestive process. But there's good bacteria and there's also bad bacteria. And bad bacteria can cause all kinds of issues. And with white-tailed deer, there's 3 primary bad bacteria, and that's E. coli, Clostridium, and Fuso. Those bacteria are bad. If you see a older deer with diarrhea all over its rear, it's usually a bacterial issue. It's got one of those, or maybe multiple of those bad bacteria in its gut, and it just is not, it's affected its whole digestive system. The interesting thing is that the real world's Expect Healthy Deer technology has whitetail specific probiotics in it to address this issue. So probiotics are basically good bacteria that you introduce to an animal to get it into its gut to counteract any bad bacteria, but also to help that animal have a more healthy digestive system where it will utilize the nutrients in its food a whole lot better. So to develop this whitetail specific probiotic, Dr. Shipley at the University of Illinois collected samples from the gut of deer that had died of various bacterial issues. And working with Dr. Aaron Gaines, they sent this to a lab, and that lab had thousands of different bacteria in there. They called it a library, bacteria library. And they would screen those good bacteria with this bad bacteria sample that was sent in, and they would find the good bacteria that would counter that bad bacteria. And so Expect Healthy Deer technology has multiple types of bacteria in the probiotic that will fight the bad bacteria. And I've actually got another PowerPoint presentation that I've showed on this where I show a buck that was I think that buck was killed when he was 9.5 years old, but I show this buck for about 6 years, and every year his antlers are getting bigger, and then one year they go backwards, and then he recovers and they get better again. Well, I show that series of slides of this buck, and I come to the year where his antlers went backwards, and then I say, anybody got any ideas why this buck, his antlers would have went backwards? And nobody has any idea. And so then I go back to the previous year's picture, and I had a picture of him the previous year that was really late in the winter. In this particular picture, you can see that deer's rear end, and it's just covered with diarrhea. That deer was not pooping pellets at the time. He had the runs, and it was all over his rear. And I said, look what happened here. he was growing and getting bigger every year. And then he got this issue where the diarrhea set in, and it affected his antler growth the following year. And then the following year, you can see from the rear view, he no longer had that issue. He got over it, and boom, his antlers start getting better again. And this is a long-winded way of saying that this Expect Healthy Deer technology that's included in our Maximizer Plus mineral and complete feed, we got it. It's in our deer blocks, our new deer blocks. It's got this good bacteria in it. This probiotic is in there to help correct some of these issues.
It only usually happens to me when I eat Mexican, so I'm not sure what kind of bacteria is in steak fajita and refried beans. What do you think?
Well, if you get on my diet, maybe you can start pooping like a human instead of an animal.
Little pellets.
Next question comes from Keith Miller from Malden, Missouri. He says, I've been following all your podcasts. I hear you talk about the rut winding down. Just wondering about the second rut. I'm in southeast Missouri. Our rut usually starts around the second week of November, then again around the second week of December. I've seen some monsters chasing. Just wondering if you will talk more about the second rut. Thanks, Keith Miller. Keith? This is a topic that I cover every year about this time because I don't believe there's a second rut. Now, why is there rut activity after November? Absolutely, there's rut activity after November, but there's one rut every year, just like there's one summer every year. There's one winter every year. How that summer or winter plays out is going to vary from year to year. So let's say, this summer or next summer we have a really hot spell in July, and then things cool off and temperatures are below average for 2 or 3 weeks, and then boom, late August, we have another really hot spell. We're not having a second summer. It's just how that summer played out with a series of peaks and valleys in the temperature. Well, the rut is the same way. We have one rut. We've got a major peak of breeding activity in mid-November, as you've noted. The whole idea that we have a second rut is just one that I don't buy into whatsoever. What we see, for the most part, after November, is we're seeing doe fawns randomly come into heat at various times. And when they do, she's likely to have a half a dozen or a dozen bucks on her tail, running through the woods, grunting, fighting, sparring, whatever. All kinds of typical rut activity. This is not the second rut. This is just part of the rut playing out. I just listened to a guy on social media this week. I had to laugh when I listened to his post. His post said, "Guys, be ready. This is the week when you're going to see a lot of doe fawns come into heat." Folks, I'm telling you, cannot pin it down to a week. And if you could, it's not going to be in December. I promise you, there is more doe fawns bred in January than there is December. See it every year. I've seen it with my captive deer. I've seen it in the wild. I see it with my trail cameras. Sure, there's going to be some come in December. It could be the first week of December. It could be the last week of December. It could be any week in between there. There's no concentration of rut activity after November. It's very random. You can't mark it on your calendar or anything like that. And this guy, his post was almost like, hey, next Tuesday at noon, be in the woods. The does are going to start coming in heat. You just can't pin it down like that, folks. It's all part of one rut. And again, yes, there is going to be rut activity outside of November, but it's just the traditional rut playing out over a period of time.
What is the latest rut activity you've ever seen? You said you've seen some bred in January. Is that the latest? Have you ever seen any in February? Or
yeah, I actually, way back when I had my captive deer, I had a doe fawn come into heat on February 14th. It was Valentine's Day. That's how I remembered it. I watched the buck breed her on Valentine's Day. She gave birth to a single buck fawn the last day of August. So, that buck fawn, he would have been a month old, 4 weeks old whenever hunting season opened October 1st. The interesting thing about that that buck fawn that she gave birth to, is he grew his first rack before he had his first birthday. Most bucks are going to have their first birthday, and they're going to be starting to grow that rack, and they're going to finish that rack out, when they're a year and a half old. Well, this buck, because of being born the last day of August, he had grown his first rack before he was even 1 year old. And that rack was a little fork horn rack. I mean, it was probably about 7-8 inches with a little 2 or 3 inch fork off of each side, little fork horn. That same buck, when he was 3 years old, scored over 180 inches. His third rack was over 180 inches. So, when we get into the topic of culling bucks or whatever, you don't ever try to cull year and a half old bucks. And I say this even knowing that a few years ago I had one on my farm. He was a big bodied year and a half old. He was bigger bodied than any of the other year and a half olds because I'd see them together. And he had like 1.5 inch spikes. That buck I shot as a year and a half. He's the only buck in my entire life that I've ever culled that was a year and a half old. Even at 2.5. So at 2.5, this buck that I'm describing, he had a pretty nice rack. He would have been an average 2.5-year-old, but at 3.5, he blew up. And that experience really was a driving force in my management of my property today, where I wait until a buck has his third rack before I put him on the cull list. Because you don't have any idea what that buck went through early in life. His mother may have been killed when he was a fawn. He may have been born late, like the one I'm describing. You can't shoot year and a half old deer and say you're culling the herd. I don't care if they got spikes. You need to wait until they're about 3 years old. And at 3 years old, that's when you put the hammer on them. Because at 3, if they're ever going to be something special, the 95+% of the time, they're going to be showing it by the time they're 3.
Yep.
So we've spun this question down a couple different rabbit holes, but guys, don't think that there's a second rut, and don't think that you should be culling year and a half old bucks.
Well, we're running a little bit behind, but I want to get one more question answered from a listener in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we've had some pretty good dialogue on this podcast. I think it'll be pretty popular. So this last one comes from Benjamin Maines from McVeytown, Pennsylvania. It says, Don and Terry, thank you for everything you guys do for the Chasing Giants podcast. My family camp has 1,500 feet of main road frontage that is in between our crop fields. These fields are planted in row crops such as beans and corn each year, and is harvested around Thanksgiving or whenever the combine is in the area. Every year when the crops are harvested, poachers or scumbags shoot our deer and just leave them go to waste. I have planted screening such as Egyptian wheat and switchgrass along this area, and somehow each year it gets sprayed and killed or smashed down by a vehicle driving through it. My question is, what would you suggest to plant along this road, or how would you handle this ongoing problem? Well, Benjamin, there is no better screen than miscanthus. So what I would do if I was you is I would plant 5 rows of miscanthus along this road. I would then, to prevent the farmer from spraying, they make 10-foot steel T-post. Sometimes you have to special order them from a farm supply store or whatever, but they make 10-foot tall posts. So I would put 10-foot tall posts along the edge next to the ag field. So the guy with the sprayer, he's not going to want to come along and hit those posts and knock the nozzles off his sprayer. That means he has to get out of the sprayer and do some work. Stick those posts along there, maybe every 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever, to keep the sprayer honest. And then for the scumbags, as you mentioned, I would hide all kinds of junk within that switchgrass or that miscanthus planting. I'd take an old field harrow and I'd turn it upside down and I'd stick it in there and I'd let the miscanthus grow up through it. I'd make sure if somebody's going to drive through there and try to knock my miscanthus over, that their vehicle's going to be sitting there when they try it. Probably not the best advice I've ever given on this podcast, but I'm just being honest. I'm not a fan of dealing with scumbags, and got them in my neighborhood. I am extremely blessed to have good neighbors. Every property that touches mine is a good neighbor, and I am extremely blessed with that. And I don't even think the scumbags that are in my neck of the woods are locals. I think they come from, the bigger towns that aren't too far away or wherever, that they've heard about me and they want to drive my roads and spotlight and stuff. And they show up on my place, I'm going to get their picture. There's just no way to get onto my farm without them getting their picture. And I'm going to deal with it when it happens. And if they happen to be driving on my property and they run over a field harrow that's been turned upside down, they get 4 flat tires and can't go anywhere. Well, guess what? They may come back to find that their truck is sitting on top of its cab because it may just get flipped on its top. Scumbags. There's no place in the world for scumbags.
It's unbelievable how people just, we work so hard and spend so much time and money, and then people try to, what did you call them? Deer pimps. A couple episodes ago. It's just they try to cheat and take advantage. I mean, when you put so much time, effort, and energy into this, and into managing these properties, it just infuriates us when people try to do stuff like this. It's just awful.
Yeah, if someone shoots a deer in my neighborhood and they're hunting legally, and it could be a buck that I know all about that's been on my property and spends 90% of his life. I'm happy for that person. Good for them. I'll shake their hand, congratulate them. If I've got shed antlers off that buck, I will give them to them and not even ask for anything in return. But all I ask is for, a little bit of respect back. If you think that you're going to come and, sit as close to my property on an open field in a blind to catch the deer coming out, and I'm going to roll out the red carpet when you shoot that deer and he runs back into my place and you want to go track him, well, you're wrong. You're going to find a side of me that most people have never seen.
All right. I want to make there's something coming after the first of the year before we close. I think it's going to be fun. We'll kind of let people know what's happening is, our partner 360 Hunting Blinds has been very good friends of ours for a lot of years. If you're a dealer of 360 Blinds, they're planning a dealer day in January that I think is going to be a huge hit to see the new production facility and new products coming out. But we're going to actually have a new segment starting the first of the year called Higgins on the Hot Seat. And what made me think about this is you just going off a little bit right there. And I think that's part of the appeal of this podcast. Everybody kind of, even though you just possibly had a mini stroke, we want to fire you up a little bit. I think the unscripted, basically unfiltered response from you, people enjoy hearing it on topics. And this is a little bit different than our listener submitted questions. That's going to remain the same because you're not going to be able to prep for this. Every week on Higgins on the Hot Seat, I'm going to bring up a topic, a question, and you're not going to have time to prepare for it. And it's basically off the cuff and no editing. It is how it is. So we hope you look forward to it. 360 had the idea, and so we're going to have that starting the first of the year. We're kind of excited about it. I got my list of stuff already started for each episode that we're going to put in there. But I'm looking forward to that.
I'm going to have my stroke medicine right here, and I'm going to have to pop a pill before we start recording the podcast, I think.
All right. Well, outside of that, make sure you stay tuned after the closing credits for our Sunday night prayer time. It'll air right after the end of this. And we appreciate everybody's support. Thanks for the prayers for Don. It's been an interesting week for sure.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. I can't tell you how much it means to me that so many of you think enough of me to reach out. And even if you didn't reach out, your prayers are much appreciated. So God bless, and we'll see you back here next week.
Take care.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Good evening. My name's Harold. I just finished playing at our church for a couple thousand people, and we got 3 more performances to go, so it's pretty late tonight, but I want to share my time with you on today about the Christmas story. Back in November, during Veterans Day, I watched a lot of World War II movies that they have out. And one I watched several times that day because I love the movie was Saving Private Ryan. They were, if you've ever seen the movie, you'll understand, they were on a rescue mission to save a guy by the last name of Ryan. And it occurred to me during that movie that the Christmas story, believe it or not, is a rescue mission. God sent his son to rescue us because we could not do it ourselves. We were behind him. We were behind enemy lines. In that God saw fit to send a rescue mission to help us cover our sins so we can have fellowship with him. And tonight, during the musical tonight, we talked about the birth of Christ and the angels and the shepherds and everything. I read a book the other day about the birth of Christ. They were talking about the shepherds, and they were, believe it or not, they weren't even allowed in synagogue back then. So they were the lowest of low, but that's who God appeared to first to give them the good news, the lowest of the low. And what was funny, I was reading and it said something about, they smell, the shepherds, they don't bathe for weeks at a time, and the sheep sleep in them with the tents. And somebody asked one of the shepherds one time about the smell, and he said, well, the sheep usually get used to it. So I thought that was kind of funny, but that's who God approached first with the good news of the gospel. The rescue mission was in motion. Christ came to earth. He walked with us. He talked with us. He learned, we had to teach him how to walk. Think about it. We changed his diaper. This is God himself, the man who spun the universe on his fingertip. Learned to walk. He walked with us. He talked with us. He ate with us. He went through puberty and all this stuff that we go through. We don't think about. But let me tell you the rest of the story. As he developed into a man, he went into ministry, and as he walked to the Jordan River, his first cousin looked at him and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." And that's a new concept to people back then, because the sins were covered by sacrificing animals, and it was a new concept to them that this man, who's the carpenter's son, would be sacrificed on our behalf. But he finished the race. He hung on the cross. He was beaten beyond recognition from what I can read and understand. He was whipped with the cat o' nine tails to where his actual rib cage shone through his back. But he said nothing. And when they hung him on the cross, and they hung him naked and up in the air with his hands and his feet nailed to the wood, his response was, "Forgive them, they don't know what they're doing." And then he said, "It is finished." And he closed his eyes and he died. But that's not where the story ends. We see the Christmas story, but the Christmas story is not a true rescue mission until we see the redemption. So Friday came, Saturday came. Oh, but goodness, guys, Sunday came. And Mary and Martha, as they approached the tomb, he's not there. He's risen. The rescue mission now is complete. And God, we thank you for giving us that rescue mission. It started with a baby in a manger that we celebrate for Christmas. But follow the whole story of the rescue mission. In Saving Private Ryan, at the end of the movie, they are actually saving Private Ryan and they bring him home. Guys, Christ did the same for us. He followed the mission. bring us fellowship and bring us home to the Father. Just want to save that, just to share that with you tonight. Once again, Terry, thank you for the opportunity. And I told my kids yesterday is that, remember, the reason for Christmas is not the things of Christmas. And just keep that in mind for people. We read the Christmas story every Christmas to my 86-year-old grandfather still reads the Christmas story to us and grandkids and great-grandkids every Christmas, and we look forward to that. Start your tradition with that and before they open the presents, just so they understand what the meaning of Christmas is. I thank you all. We covered your prayers. I pray for you daily. I get to the office and I pray for everybody I can do by name. It may take me an hour or two, but I pray for you daily. And we are told to share each other's burdens. But I want to bring that with you. Christmas is not Santa Claus. It is a rescue mission for us. And let's pray. And I love each one of you and thank you for this opportunity. So let me pray with us and we'll go. Father, thank you for the day. Thank you for the many blessings of it. Thank you for the rescue mission. I needed that rescue mission because I am a sinner and I am separated from you because of sin. But you sent the rescue mission so I can have eternal joy and eternal peace and be able to stand before you and hear, well done, my faithful servant. Oh my goodness, what a great day that's going to be. And we look forward to that day. Father, forgive us when we fail you. We don't do this on purpose, but we know you're here to forgive me when I do. We just pray that, Father, for all the affliction and some of the people who are hurting, that you will comfort them and let them know that you are still walking with them all the time. You never left them, and you never will. For we ask this in Christ's name, amen. Thank you, guys. Have a great Christmas. And remember, it is a rescue mission that we need to tell the world. Thank you, and we'll talk to you again. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and if you ever need to talk to someone, please reach out to a bunch of us on there. It's Terry, myself, my brother. We would love to talk to you if you have any questions about what this Christ is and what he means to us. I'll be glad to talk to you. We're not going to talk down to you. We would love to share the love that we know with you. Thank you. God bless you. See you soon. Bye.